Welcome, everyone. We are so happy that you're here with us to, of course, officially start out our Modifier 59 presentation today. I'm very happy that I have my special guest, Pam Vanderbilt, on this show with me today. I know we're all excited. Welcome to the show, Pam.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm so excited that you reached out and asked me to be part of your fabulous product that you're doing here. I'm excited that you're doing this for the industry.
It's so needed, right? I mean,
Oh,
we both were at HealthCon in Washington, D.C. I know we learned a lot and different things. And it was just so nice to be there together with our peers and industry leaders that are really trying to push forward accurate information, um, quality education, right? That the AAPC always puts out. What was your favorite thing you learned at HealthCon? I'm just curious. Like, was there any tidbits that you enjoyed?
Uh, I'm going to tell you honestly, my favorite thing about both health cons, regional and national, was that opportunity to network and get to spend time with other people like you and Christine and Victoria Mall, and just to be able to collaborate and say, are you seeing this? What's happening in your world? So that we are um, more aware, because there's so much to know. There's no way any one of us can know it all, and we really do rely on each other. From a topics perspective, though, there were some really good presentations. This girl, Jennifer McNamara, and our friend Christine Hall did a fabulous revenue cycle presentation. It was so much fun.
Yes, that was so much
So,
fun in Nashville. And when I got to go in August to regional, thanks to you, Pam. Thank you for inviting me. It was so much fun to get to go there as an attendee only. It was so nice to get to like just attend and like pick the sessions I wanted to attend. And I really enjoyed that. My husband and I got to go out to the city and do some museums, which was fun, and we got to have some dim sum, and I got to go to a jazz club. I mean, like it was really fun. So I'm glad I got to
yeah.
do it. Um, as everyone knows, recently I was at the Healthcare Advocate Summit, where I was with a lot of those in the patient access, patient advocacy, arena, and it was really fabulous to get to talk about technology. So we'll talk a little bit today about how you can improve your technology when it comes to understanding modifiers and automating things. But let's dig in and talk about this Modify 59 situation. It's a problem. It's been a problem since forever. Back in 2005, same as the OIG audit they did for 25, right? They did one for 59,
Oh,
right? A lot of numbers that they shot out there as to how much money was expected to be paid back
oh
because
yeah.
of the inaccuracies. When you think of 59, Pam, what comes to mind? Like, what are some of the challenges you've seen in your audits that you do?
Well, I have to say one of the first things that always gets brought up is, guess what? We got paid for it. Well,
Mhm.
just because you got paid doesn't mean you were supposed to have gotten paid, and it does not mean you'll keep it. So, absolutely, if we're considering putting any modifier on a claim that has to do with payment, we need to understand how to use the modifier correctly. The really bad part, 59 and 25 are the ones that are the most misused modifiers. Well, that's the way we've always done it. Or the person who trained me 15 years ago said, if I have two procedure codes together, I have to put 59 on one of them. And they don't know the rules. They don't understand why that 59 is there and if it should or should not be used.
It's very, very true. And I feel like there's just so much disconnect. And so on the screen here, we have pretty much the basic facts. I mean, we're not going to bog you down with every little ins and out because guess what? Medicare has put out a great update to their file there, right? So we want to make sure that we're thinking about the updates there. And I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat here the link to that. Thanks to Pam for providing that. So we have a link to the file update, and I think it's a really good idea to kind of review that, right? And think about the bundle. right? I get this all the time. Like, you don't need this modifier if a bundle does not exist. Like, think about why you're
Yep.
using it. There's one thing, right? And if I can simplify it all for you, is there a bundle and does your documentation support it? Plain and
Yep.
simple.
Yeah. And I have found over the years that if a bundle exists, there is a high probability we should not be billing that second procedure code.
So true. So true.
And it's so frustrating. One of the things I really love about the new MLN that came out, it's dated for March of 23. But one of the things I love about it is Medicare clearly shifted their focus to the X modifiers and
Mhm.
really talk about specificity. Well, when else do we talk about specificity? When we're talking about ICD-10,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
We always code to the highest level of specificity. Our X modifiers are our specific modifiers for why we're trying to unbundle using 59. And 59 is our last resort modifier. We shouldn't put it
Yes.
on unless no other more specific modifier is acceptable. Well,
Exactly. Because yeah.
I'm of the personal opinion that if an X modifier doesn't apply, if we've already eliminated RT and LT and all our anatomic modifiers, we've eliminated all of that, and we're down to should we or shouldn't we unbundle this with 59? If an X modifier doesn't apply, the answer is no, we shouldn't unbundle it.
There you go. I in surgery, I know you and I are both ortho ladies. I know. Shout out to all our ortho people out there. We love it. So we often deal with this, and occasionally we run across the separate procedure designation. And there are times where we just have to accept the fact that we did something more extensive. And like the example I used last night, shout out to the Tampa, Florida chapter I got to speak at last night about Modify 59. And I was just thinking about it, from the aspect of what we can compare this concept to. We have elements of medicine that they just expect you to do because you're already in there, you're doing it, right? So like with E&M, for instance, that just kind of came to me is like the data component. We got so confused about orders and reviews. It's like you order a test, you're expected to review it with the patient. Like that's just number one. So same concept, you're in the body, you're doing this. If you're not doing anything separately over here, and if they're telling you that we designate this procedure as inclusive to a more extensive procedure, unless you're doing only that, then you don't get paid extra. And that's just the end of
Yep,
the game.
exactly.
Makes
Well,
sense,
and I
right?
I think exactly, and I had the opportunity to
Mm.
spend some time with Jennifer during the Ortho Summit,
Yes.
and it was an absolute fabulous time. And we talked a lot about modifiers. And when we talk about spine, that's
Mhm.
one of those places where, oof, do we or don't we?
Oh.
And spine is one of those. Well, what level of the spine are we working on at the time? If we've changed levels
Hmm.
and we're in a different area of the spine, then it's possible that we can unbundle the service that we're doing at that level from the services we did at a different level. And
Yes.
so those are the types of things that we're looking at is did we move?
Hmm.
Um, just because, we maybe went out another centimeter or two doesn't mean that for all surgical procedures, we're in a separate site or we're in a separate organ system. And
True.
those are the things that we really have to look at.
Absolutely. And I know you were the one that called me that one day, that infamous day where we're like, what is Medicare doing with this NCCI policy with on July 1st? And because the conference was in a couple weeks, and July 1st, the PTP edit file had said, as of July 1st, we're going to start bundling these new 6305253 codes that were created specifically as add-on codes at the same time as a fusion. And I mean, we know the whole, hoopla we've dealt with for years when it comes to the fusion, Medicare saying, no, you can't bill it for decompression at the same level. And other payers said, yeah, whatever. So we were excited for this, right? And then all of a
Oh,
sudden they're
yeah.
like, nope, got it out of 59. I'm like, what? Why
It's
is it
an
59?
add-on code. We don't put modifiers on add-on codes. What is
I don't
this?
understand. What are you doing? Right. And so it's crazy. And so I'm so glad that we researched it and we're able to tell our team there at the conference that Medicare realized, they walked it back. I'm so glad for all the other consultants out there that saw it before we did and said, hey, we're gonna fight this. And thankfully they realized their error and removed it.
Yep.
But it's gosh, man, you, and that's what I told them last night. I said, sometimes you have to pay attention to what you know is right and ethical, and it could be another situation like this where it was an error. So if you find an edit or a policy that you feel is maybe not as accurate for maybe your specialty, you can write in about it. You can, I wouldn't say the word complain, but you can, as a professional, use your voice and say,
Yes.
hey, we should look at this again. And this is why. So we want to
Yeah.
look at those things.
Well, and another thing to your point, NCCI is updated on a quarterly basis. So
Yes.
just because we've always done something doesn't mean it's the right thing to do today. It
Mhm.
may have been updated. So maybe we've got a scenario where in the past it would have been appropriate to put a modifier on to unbundle two services that now they've recognized, oh, there's really not a bundling edit, and they've removed the P2P edit.
Mhm.
We should not continue to just put a modifier on it because we've always done it that way. And so we need to, I use Codify, but whatever you use for your editing software, periodically run our services through there that we commonly report together so that we know that, yes, in fact, a modifier would be necessary if now the documentation supports us unbundling the services.
Exactly. And we always, when we decide to put this modifier on, we're always asking ourselves a couple different questions. What are we doing and why are we doing it? Those are the things that we have to justify, because guess what? There is always a risk to adding any modifier. We are being tracked. We are being tracked by
Oh,
insurance
yeah.
payers. So it's like they're watching you guys. It's like being stalked. Like they are watching you. And so this stalker out there is saying, hey, we're not going to pay you if you keep throwing at us wrong information. So we need to understand the documentation requirements. So for instance, I live in surgery, you live in the surgery world. We know that there are other elements outside of the X modifier. So the separate practitioner, encounter, and site that we can use, that we're allowed to, like separate incision, separate, injury, things like that. So if it doesn't fall into those X categories, we usually use the last resort, right? We're still covered, but we want to make sure we're using the right X modifier, because they
Yeah.
created them to be tracked. They want to see why we're using 59, which is why they created that subset in 2015. They wanted to make sure that they could see, we know you're using it, but why are you using it? What's the reason?
Exactly. Well, I found it a little bit interesting because in the updated MLN, they
Mm-hmm.
give examples. What
Yes.
is an appropriate time to use our XS for separate site or
Mm-hmm.
separate organ system, right? And so they give us examples of when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate for each XS, XE, and XU.
Mm-hmm.
There's not an example in their product that says when to use XP. And I saw
I
Kimberly's on
know.
here, and she's heard me say
I
this a
know.
million times. I can't come up with a reason we would use XP. And so I'm dying for somebody to come up with a valid one, but it makes me feel a lot better that CMS clearly doesn't have an example either. So,
Yeah, so I have done research on some of the specialty organizations, and some of them do have some scenarios that they throw out there. But I'm thinking, and this is the one thing I think of. If you have a separate practitioner, the only reason to use that modifier would be like if they're in your same group, they're same tax ID, because the reason to use it is because it's going to be on the same claim or the same day, and it's going to be tied to you. So it wouldn't make sense for it to be somebody outside of your organization, because they're going to submit their own
correct.
claim, what they did. So it's more of a situation like that. I'm thinking, is there a reason for a procedure maybe that is bundled, right? Normally, but somebody out, in your clinic went back and did this. But then you got to think about it. Are you purposely scheduling it that way because you are trying to skirt the system. That can
Yes.
also be tracked and be looked at in your documentation. So be careful of that one for sure. Medical necessity always overrides everything. So you may have
Oh,
hit
yeah.
all of the criteria you think for that is required to be documented for a certain procedure. But if medical necessity isn't there, you're dead in the water. So I did an audit recently. This is a common thing that happens, in orthopedics is laterality, right? So there was a knee replacement being billed and they billed it with osteoarthritis of the hip. It's easy to just click the wrong button, right? That's going to be a red flag to the insurance. It's important when you have maybe a staff issue where you're short in staff, maybe you don't have a coder, to have somebody that knows what they're doing to set up your EMR correctly. There are ways that you can actually flag certain things where you know that only certain conditions can be billed with this. And you can say, hey, if any of these things are not true, it's going to stop this claim and remind me to fix something so that you don't have to go down that road. We know there's a lot of administrators out there. I've worked with some of them, unfortunately, that they have this idea of no forward thinking. And like my friend Tara always says, they're just reactive. They don't think about what is going to happen now or what now is going to affect later. They're just like, we'll just fix it later. We want the money in now, but like, where's the deal? You may not get that money now
Yeah.
because
Well,
you did something
and
wrong.
it costs money. Every single time we have to touch a claim after
Mm-hmm,
it's submitted originally, it costs us about $20.
mm-hmm.
So think about how many times we're touching that claim. And oh my gosh, if it's a 99213 and we touched it 5 times, we did the service for free.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times administrative staff just does not see that every time we're reacting, we're costing the practice money.
Absolutely. We're in a situation these days in the healthcare system that we need every cent that we can, and it's not only about that, but it's about integrity, right? Um, we don't want to put ourselves at risk. I mean, when it comes
Absolutely.
to the Medicare policies, guys, you're messing with the government of the United States of America. You're not going to come out the winner. You're not. We have HHS.gov examples all the time of people who thought they would beat the system and they lost big time. We don't have to go very far to watch the news and see how many people in the world are trying to cheat the United States government and are trying to get away with things. But we don't want to be those kind of people. We want to have integrity. And we mentioned, of course, Miss Christine Hall. And of course, I will be with Miss Christine Hall in double session once more at the NAMUS conference in Charleston in December. We have a double session all about revenue integrity. So it's so important that you attend if you can. Please join the NAMUS team. I'm going to be there with some of my favorites, of course, Christine Hall, Shannon DeConda, Sean Weiss, Scott Kraft, Stephanie Allard, among others. So we're definitely excited to be there. And so I hope you can join that. But the reason we're doing all of this modifier education, guys, is because we need more education. And one of the things we always forget is just the basics. Let's get down to the basics, guys. We don't need to go any further as to when to apply a modifier than the Medicare physician fee schedule indicators, the procedure to procedure indicators. So we talked first about, right, you don't apply it unless you have a reason, if it needs it, right? So guess what? Medicare tells us, number one, if you see, excuse me, that should be a 0. Ignore me. So it should be 0 is the first one, right? So I put 1, 2, 3. This was 1, 2, 3, but the first one is a 0, right? So that one should be no, right? It's a no-go, right? And then the indicator of 1, bear with me here. This slide is not my favorite right now. It's a maybe, right? So it's a maybe, right? And then a 9 is just leave me alone. So leave me alone. I don't need this modifier for any reason. It has nothing to do with me. So first is no, 0, 0. Maybe is a 1, and then 9 is leave me alone. So that's the way I think of it. And I think it's important that we understand these indicators, that we don't need an encoder to tell us, but it's great because all the encoder software out there, it uses the same formula that Medicare gives you. What do you think with the indicators? Why do you think those are so important?
Well, clearly it's going to give us a clue as to do we need a modifier or not. And let me back up just 2 seconds because we need to remember when we're talking about
Mhm.
NCCI and the modifier, the peer to the P2P edits, that this is driven by CMS.
Yes.
Just because we run something through the editor and it says, no, you don't need a modifier. If you're billing mom and pop insurance out there,
Mhm.
their claim editing software may require you to put a modifier on it if it's appropriate. So
Yes.
we do have to remember that sometimes we go outside of the rules as they are based off of CMS and NCCI. Um,
Exactly.
and that's true for a lot of stuff we do, not just our modifier usage, right?
Yes, exactly.
But I when I teach modifiers, a lot of times I'll go and pull up examples of what my screen looks like when I put in codes from through Codify
Right,
because
exactly.
they kind of give us a system. Green light, go. Yellow light, you better stop and think about it. And red light, you can't do it. Don't build them together. There's not an exception.
Yes.
And I love that they give us those, go, pause, or stop. And when we think about it, when we get those yellow ones, we better have some pretty significant reason besides the fact that it can be allowed to use the modifier. And I'm going to tell you, you better have moved to a different part of the body. And the documentation better pretty clearly specify it, or it needs to truly be non-overlapping services. Or should we even be looking at 59? Do we have a more
Mhm.
appropriate an anatomic modifier? And
Yes. Mhm.
speaking of that, Kimberly made a point when we were talking about XP earlier.
Mhm.
Same day, same group. So maybe the patient had a
Yep.
morning case with one provider, an afternoon. But wouldn't we have a more appropriate modifier?
Maybe. It could
Wouldn't
be if
we
it's
have
a
a
repeat
70
service.
modifier?
If
Yeah,
it's a
a
exact same
70,
code,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah, that
yeah,
could be true. Absolutely. Now, I will say that there is one example I used last night because I'm in GI. I do a lot of GI work in colonoscopies, and there is a rule that, of course, Medicare mentioned it in their policy that if you have it's the same organ but non-contiguous areas, right? So
yep,
you have a lesion and non-contiguous. So if you don't know what that means, look it up. Non-contiguous means not touching. So
yep,
they're not touching. So you would expect to see lesions like polyps in the colon that are not touching, but you're removing them. You're also, again, removing separate lesions. So, but it's the same organ. So you have to know that rule. Is it for that? We used to get
yeah,
a lot actually where they would do a biopsy, the 45380 code, and it wasn't for a lesion. They were looking for something else. So we couldn't get it because it didn't fall within the criteria for that. So that's one of the examples I
yeah,
used for that.
yep.
So everyone, we're very excited, and I talked about it every week since we started this whole process. The modifier boot camp. We are so excited. We are coming. First of all, we want to be there live in Dallas on October 27th. We're looking to make sure that we can get there live for you. If for some reason we don't sell enough seats for the live version, we will keep it virtual for y'all so you can still come virtually. But right now the tickets are so cheap. Like it's just like giving it away. So please, please, please jump on there and the Eventbrite, and there will be a link for you to attend here shortly in the comments. You'll see that link pop up. So just please, please, please attend if you can. And then, of course, we mentioned earlier our practice managers.
I
They
think
have a lot of
I
work.
think
Did I lose you, Pam?
is that you or me?
I think it was you. I hear you again.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, we're back, guys. So,
All right.
yes. So live in Dallas, October 27th. We are coming to Florida as well. So Florida is going to be a couple of locations. We're going to be in Daytona on the 9th of December. We're hoping to be. We have sold a few seats there. We're hoping to have more virtual and in person. And then, of course, we're going to come to just announce Tampa on the West Coast on December 16th. We just announced it at the chapter last night. They're very excited. So we've already started, of course, selling seats for that location live. So we're really excited. You can attend virtual any location around the country at any date. So if you can't come or you don't live anywhere near these locations, you can still attend virtual, not a problem. Just grab your seats now before they fill up. And then St. Louis, again, is going to be in the spring at the zoo. We're so excited to be at the St. Louis Zoo. I'm super excited for that. And then the Practice Management Symposium, that's coming October 5th. We know that practice managers, they need education. So we want to make sure to make that available to them. So the Practice Management Symposium is October 5th. Coming up. We're really excited. We're going to talk about things that you as practice managers or even directors, you need to know. You need to have an understanding that your staff needs training. We know that you're busy. You're in meetings. Maybe some meetings you feel like you don't even need to be in there. You're just going to meeting after meeting. And you know they need this, but you don't have the time to train them, right? So we're going to give you some tips and some resources that can help you and your team be successful. We have the amazing Rhonda Buckholz as our keynote speaker. I mean, how fabulous is it to have Rhonda Buckholz as our speaker? We're going to have Bertram Atlantico talk about HR and managing your team. We're going to have the famous Jessica Miller from Medicodio talk about AI and how you can improve your practice with AI. Great stuff. And grab your code FALL20. So for 20% off, you can use this code at our Practice Management Symposium. The link to that event will be at the end of this presentation. There'll be a QR code you can click on or you can scan to do that. So any last thoughts, Pam, that you have about Modifier 59 that you want to share with the audience?
I'm just going to go back to what I said toward the beginning of our conversation. If you think you need to use Modifier 59, if nothing else applies, your laterality modifiers, your return to the ORs, repeat procedures, or your X modifiers, you probably should not be unbundling it. So unless you have a commercial payer that requires you to use 59 and they don't recognize the X modifiers, after today, you should never use 59 again.
Absolutely. I 100%. I totally agree. So, well, thank you, Pam, for joining. I want to thank our audience for coming on today real quickly with us. And we'll be back next week with Miss Christine Hall. We're going to dig into those telehealth modifiers. So you do not want to miss that presentation. On the 26th, we'll be here with Miss Terry Fletcher. We're going to talk about split shared. It's going to be fabulous. So we'll see you guys next week.
Bye-bye.